The Soul's Journey, Humanity's Quest for Spiritual Meaning. Maria Nguyen stood motionless among thousands in St. Peter's Square, her eyes fixed on the chimney atop the Sistine Chapel. At 67, she had spent her life savings to travel from her small village in the Philippines to witness this moment. "I've waited my entire life to see the white smoke," she whispered, clutching a wooden rosary worn smooth by decades of prayer. "Before I die, I need to witness the moment when heaven touches earth." Around her, the crowd held a collective breath, united in a moment of profound spiritual anticipation that transcended language, culture, and even individual faith. This scene, repeated throughout human history in various forms, illustrates something fundamental about our nature. We are spiritual seekers, constantly searching for meaning beyond our material existence. Whether through organized religion with its elaborate rituals or personal spiritual quests, humans have always been driven by an insatiable curiosity about what lies beyond the visible world. The psychology behind this spiritual seeking is deeply woven into our consciousness. We are meaning-making creatures, uncomfortable with the notion that our existence might be random or purposeless. This discomfort propels us on journeys of discovery, some finding answers in ancient texts and traditions, others in personal meditation and reflection, and many in the powerful combination of both individual seeking and communal ritual. The greatest question that haunts every human being at some point is not about career or wealth, but about purpose, explains Dr. Jonathan Berg, a renowned psychologist specializing in spiritual psychology. What am I doing here? What happens when I die? Is there more to existence than what I can see and touch? These questions transcend culture and time. The quest for spiritual meaning manifests differently across individuals. Some are drawn to mysterious and supernatural elements, angels, divine judgment, cosmic order, finding comfort in narratives that suggest an organized universe with moral principles. Others seek enlightenment through deep contemplation, turning inward to discover truths about existence. Many find themselves drawn to symbolic stories and imagery that communicate profound truths beyond literal interpretation. What connects these varied approaches is the underlying human need for transcendence, to feel part of something greater than ourselves. This need becomes particularly poignant when confronting mortality, as seen in the elaborate rituals surrounding death in various traditions. Perhaps nowhere is this intersection of individual spiritual seeking and communal ritual more dramatically displayed than in the centuries-old traditions surrounding papal succession. The Vatican's intricate protocols following a pope's death represent both an institutional passage and a deeply symbolic spiritual journey. Each element, from the Camerlengo's gentle tapping of the pope's forehead with a silver hammer to the breaking of the fisherman's ring, carries layers of meaning that connect individual faith to collective tradition. These rituals are not merely procedural, but represent humanity's attempt to bring order to the chaos of death, to find meaning in transition, and to affirm continuity in the face of loss. As we explore the fascinating intersection between individual spiritual psychology and communal religious rituals, we discover something remarkable. Despite our diverse approaches to spirituality, we share common psychological needs for meaning, for connection, for transcendence. The journey from personal quest to communal expression and back again forms a fascinating cycle that has shaped human consciousness throughout our existence. In the following sections, we will delve deeper into both the psychological underpinnings of spiritual seeking and the rich traditions exemplified by Vatican rituals, revealing how these apparently separate domains actually inform and reflect each other in profound ways. By understanding this relationship, we gain insight not just into religious practices, but into the very nature of human consciousness and our eternal quest for meaning. The psychology of seeking meaning and spiritual connection. Deep within the human psyche lies an insatiable hunger, a yearning that transcends cultural boundaries and has persisted throughout millennia. This hunger isn't for food, wealth, or even love, but for something perhaps more fundamental: meaning. The psychology behind this spiritual seeking reveals profound truths about our nature as conscious beings in a vast and often mysterious universe. John Winters, once a high-powered Wall Street analyst managing billions in assets, found himself standing at the window of his corner office one Tuesday afternoon, staring at the tiny figures of people below and feeling utterly empty. I had everything society told me would bring fulfillment: money, status, power, yet I felt like a hollow shell, he recalls. 3 months later, after witnessing the election of Pope Francis in 2013, Winters made a decision that shocked his colleagues. He resigned his position to pursue theological studies at a small monastery in Umbria, Italy. Something awakened in me when I saw that white smoke rise and watched the faces in the crowd, Winters explains. I realized I'd been searching for meaning in all the wrong places. Winters' experience illustrates what psychologists identify as the first major component of spiritual psychology: the desire for deep understanding. This isn't merely intellectual curiosity, but a profound need to comprehend existence beyond material reality. Humans instinctively sense that beneath the surface of everyday life lies a deeper current of meaning. We seek answers to questions that science, for all its remarkable achievements, cannot fully address. Why are we here? What happens after death? Is there purpose to suffering? Dr. Elena Vasquez, who studies comparative religion at Columbia University, explains, the human mind seems wired to reject the notion that existence is random or meaningless. Even committed atheists create frameworks of meaning, often centered on concepts like human progress, ethical responsibility, or the pursuit of knowledge. We cannot function as conscious beings without some narrative that provides cohesion to our experience. This search for deeper meaning often manifests in a fascination with the mysterious and supernatural. Stories of divine beings, afterlife realms, and cosmic justice have captured human imagination across civilizations. The ancient Book of Enoch, with its vivid descriptions of heavenly realms and angelic beings, continues to captivate readers thousands of years after its composition. Similarly, accounts of near-death experiences draw millions of interested readers, regardless of their religious affiliations. We're drawn to mystery, explains Dr. Vasquez. The unknown simultaneously frightens and attracts us. Mystery creates cognitive tension that demands resolution, yet paradoxically, we often treasure the mystery itself. We want answers, but we also desire to preserve the sense of wonder. This attraction to mystery isn't simply entertainment. It reflects a fundamental aspect of human consciousness, our awareness of our own limitations. We know that we don't know everything, and this knowledge creates both humility and fascination. Maya Patel, a software engineer from Bangalore, describes her own journey. I was raised in a strictly rational household. My parents were both scientists who dismissed religion as superstition. Yet I found myself drawn to meditation and Vedic philosophy. There was something in me that couldn't be satisfied by code and algorithms, a part that needed connection to something transcendent. Maya's experience highlights another crucial aspect of spiritual psychology: learning through symbols and stories. Humans are natural metaphor makers, translating complex abstract ideas into tangible images and narratives. Religious traditions have always understood this, employing rich symbolism to communicate truth that might otherwise remain inaccessible. The symbol speaks directly to both conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche, explains Jungian analyst Dr. Robert Simmons. When we encounter powerful religious symbols, the cross, the lotus flower, the tree of life, something resonates within us at a level deeper than rational thought. These symbols activate archetypal patterns in our psyche, connecting us to collective human experience across time. This symbolic dimension of spiritual seeking manifests not just in static images, but in narratives and rituals. The story of Enoch's ascension through multiple heavens, for instance, functions as both literal account and symbolic journey, representing stages of spiritual development and consciousness expansion that anyone might experience. Dr. Simmons continues, these symbolic narratives provide maps for the interior journey. When we read about Enoch moving through successive heavenly realms, we're receiving instruction about stages of spiritual awakening that transcend any specific religious context. Perhaps most fundamental to spiritual psychology is what researchers identify as contemplative introspection, the turning inward to discover truth. This contemplative dimension appears across traditions, from Buddhist meditation to Christian mysticism to Sufi practices. The underlying principle remains consistent. By quieting external distractions and examining consciousness itself, we access deeper dimensions of reality. Father Thomas Keating, a Trappist monk who pioneered centering prayer, described this process. In deep contemplation, we move beyond thoughts, images, and emotions to experience the ground of being itself. This is an escape from reality, but entrance into a more fundamental reality that undergirds all existence. Research increasingly supports the psychological benefits of these contemplative practices. Studies show meditation and prayer can reduce anxiety, improve concentration, and foster compassion. But practitioners often report something beyond measurable benefits, a sense of connection to what various traditions call God, universal consciousness, or ultimate reality. This points to the final and perhaps most powerful aspect of spiritual psychology, the yearning for connection to something beyond the individual self. Whether conceived as personal relationship with a divine being or merging with universal consciousness, this desire for transcendent connection drives much spiritual seeking. Sarah Cohen, a hospice nurse in Portland, describes witnessing this need daily. Working with the dying, I've seen that when people face mortality, questions of meaning become urgent. Even those who've never been religious often reach for something beyond themselves, some connection that transcends physical dissolution. It seems hardwired into us. The search for meaning, attraction to mystery, learning through symbols, contemplative introspection, and yearning for connection. These intertwined aspects of spiritual psychology help explain the persistent human quest for transcendence. They also illuminate why, even in our technological age, rituals surrounding profound transitions like death continue to hold such power, as we'll explore next through the rich symbolism of Vatican traditions. Religious rituals, the collective expression of spiritual longing. As the silver hammer gently strikes the forehead of the deceased pope 3 times, a profound silence engulfs the papal apartment. This is not merely procedure. It is the moment when individual faith transforms into collective tradition, when personal spirituality becomes institutionalized ritual. In this ancient ceremony, performed by the Camerlengo, while softly calling the pontiff's baptismal name, we witness the powerful intersection between individual spiritual psychology and communal religious expression. Religious rituals serve as bridges between the personal and collective dimensions of spirituality. They transform interior experiences, often ineffable and deeply personal, into shared, visible actions that bind communities together across time and space. These rituals don't replace individual spiritual seeking, but rather complement and enhance it, providing structure and community to what might otherwise remain isolated personal experiences. Rituals create sacred time and space, explains Dr. Catherine Albanese, historian of religion at the University of California. They punctuate ordinary existence with moments of transcendence, reminding participants that there are dimensions to reality beyond everyday experience. In this sense, rituals function as portals, opportunities to step outside mundane reality and connect with something greater. This transformative power of ritual becomes particularly evident in ceremonies surrounding death. Death represents the ultimate mystery, the threshold beyond which empirical knowledge cannot reach. In the face of this profound unknown, humans across cultures have developed elaborate rituals to create meaning and provide comfort. The Vatican's protocols following a pope's death represent one of the most richly symbolic and historically layered examples of such rituals. The psychological impact of these ceremonies operates on multiple levels. For the individual participant or observer, rituals provide emotional regulation, a structured way to process complex feelings of grief, uncertainty, and hope. The predictable patterns of ritual create a sense of security amid chaos, offering a container for overwhelming emotions. For the community, rituals reaffirm shared values and beliefs at moments when they might otherwise be questioned. They demonstrate continuity. Even as individuals die, the community and its traditions persist. This continuity provides powerful psychological reassurance, particularly in times of transition or crisis. Professor James Martinson of Harvard Divinity School notes, When a community gathers for ritual, something remarkable happens at the neuropsychological level. Studies show that synchronized movements, shared attention, and communal emotion create a sense of boundary dissolution, what sociologists call collective effervescence. Individuals experience themselves as part of something larger, which satisfies our deep need for belonging, while also connecting to our spiritual yearning for transcendence. The symbolic elements within rituals often operate with remarkable psychological sophistication. Consider the breaking of the Pope's fisherman's ring and lead seal after death. On a practical level, this prevents forgery, but symbolically, it marks the definitive end of personal authority and the transition of power back to the collective, in this case, the College of Cardinals. This powerful symbol addresses the psychological need for clear boundaries around leadership transitions, while acknowledging that authority ultimately derives from the community, not the individual. Similarly, the 9 days of mourning, the novenalis, create a psychological space for transition. 9 days is long enough for the reality of loss to be processed, but structured enough to prevent endless grieving. The daily masses during this period allow for repeated gathering and shared expression of emotion, creating rhythm in a time of disorientation. The impact of these rituals extends far beyond the immediate participants. Through global media coverage, millions participate virtually in these ceremonies, finding in them expressions of their own spiritual questioning. A taxi driver in Buenos Aires, watching the funeral of Pope John Paul II, described it as a moment when I felt connected to something eternal, not just Catholic tradition, but human tradition, stretching back thousands of years. This points to another crucial aspect of religious ritual, its ability to collapse time. When Cardinal Farrell, as Camerlengo, taps the Pope's forehead and calls his baptismal name, he performs essentially the same ritual that has marked papal deaths for centuries. In that moment, past and present converge, and participants experience themselves as part of an unbroken chain of human spiritual seeking. Dr. Elaine Pagels, religious historian at Princeton, observes, effective rituals manage a remarkable feat. They simultaneously address universal human needs while expressing the particular values of a specific tradition. The rituals surrounding a pope's death speak to universal human questions about mortality, transition, and continuity, while specifically embodying Catholic understandings of authority, sanctity, and apostolic succession. What makes the Vatican rituals particularly fascinating is their layered symbolism. Beneath their Christian significance lie even older patterns of ritual meaning. The Camerlengo's verification of death, for instance, echoes ancient practices, ensuring that leadership transitions are clear and uncontested. The public display of the deceased echoes traditions found across cultures that allow communities to witness and accept the reality of significant deaths. The power of these rituals to connect individual and collective experience becomes especially evident when we examine how they address fundamental spiritual questions. The elaborate ceremonies following a pope's death aren't simply procedural. They're attempting to provide communal answers to the same questions that drive individual spiritual seeking. What happens after death? How do we maintain continuity amid change? What gives life meaning in the face of mortality? In this way, the Vatican rituals surrounding death and succession represent not just Catholic tradition, but a sophisticated psychological response to universal human needs, providing structure, meaning, and community precisely when these elements seem most threatened by the reality of death. As we'll explore next, these rituals unfold in specific, carefully choreographed ways that reveal both ancient wisdom and remarkable adaptability to changing circumstances. When a pope dies, tradition, ritual, and meaning. Within 15 minutes of a pope's final breath, a carefully choreographed sequence begins that has remained largely unchanged for centuries. Cardinal Kevin Farrell, as Camerlengo or Chamberlain of the Holy Roman Church, would enter the papal apartment with a small delegation. In the profound silence of this moment, he would approach the bed where the pope's body lies. Raising a small silver hammer, an object that seems transported from another era, the Camerlengo would gently tap the pope's forehead 3 times. "Francis, Francis, Francis," he would call, using the pope's baptismal name. In this moment, ancient tradition and modern reality converge in a ritual that serves both practical and symbolic purposes. The silence following this call confirms what medical science has already determined, yet the ritual acknowledges something deeper. The passing of not just a man, but an office that Catholics believe connects directly to the Apostle Peter and Christ himself. Dr. Francesca Rossi, historian of Vatican traditions, explains, "The three taps symbolize the Trinity, while the silver hammer represents authority, not the Camerlengo's personal authority, but the institutional authority that continues even when the Pope dies." It is a moment of extraordinary emotion for those present, marking the exact transition when one papacy ends and the sede vacante, the vacant seat, officially begins. What follows unfolds with precision honed over centuries. The Camerlengo officially declares the Pope is truly dead and records the exact time. The papal apartments are sealed. Then comes one of the most symbolically charged moments, the destruction of the Pope's personal symbols of authority. The fisherman's ring, gold emblazoned with an image of Salmis, Peter casting nets used to seal official papal documents, must be destroyed. So too must the lead seal used for papal bulls. This isn't merely administrative procedure. It represents the definitive end of a specific papal reign and prevents any possibility of documents being falsely issued in the deceased pope's name. The physical destruction of these objects carries powerful emotional weight, notes Vatican correspondent Paolo Rodari. "I've witnessed this moment, and the sound of the ring being crushed with a special tool creates an audible finality, a sound that seems to echo through centuries of papal succession." Meanwhile, within the Vatican, the machinery of transition activates with quiet efficiency. The body must be prepared for public viewing, a task that balances dignity with practicality. Unlike civil leaders, popes are not embalmed in the modern sense, though some conservation measures are taken to allow for public viewing. The pope is dressed in red papal vestments with a white mitre, and traditionally displayed on a raised catafalque in St. Peter's Basilica. Pope Francis, however, has requested modifications to these traditions, reflecting his lifelong commitment to simplicity. Instead of an elevated platform, his body would rest in a simple wooden coffin lined with zinc, open for mourners to approach more intimately. "This change may seem minor," observes Sister Maria Teresa, a theologian who studies papal history, but it carries profound theological significance. By requesting a simpler display, Francis continues, even in death, his emphasis on accessibility and humility, qualities he sees as essential to the papacy. For the faithful worldwide, the days following a pope's death create a unique temporal space, what anthropologists call liminal time, when normal structures are suspended. The 9-day mourning period, known as the Novenialis, provides structure for this liminality. During these 9 days, daily requiem masses are celebrated by the College of Cardinals. Each day carries its own emotional tenor. The first days often bring shock and immediate grief. The middle period typically sees deeper reflection on the Pope's legacy. By the final days, attention begins shifting toward the future and the upcoming conclave. Throughout this period, St. Peter's Square becomes a focal point for global Catholicism. Pilgrims from around the world gather, some sleeping on the cobblestones to secure positions, awaiting their brief moment to file past the Pope's body. "I waited 14 hours, recalls Magdalena Suarez, who traveled from Mexico City when Pope John Paul II died in 2005. "When I finally entered the basilica, I had perhaps 20 seconds near his body. But in those seconds, I felt connected to something eternal. People were weeping openly all around me. We were strangers speaking different languages, yet united in that moment." This collective grieving serves psychological needs that transcend religious boundaries. The public nature of the mourning provides validation for personal grief, while creating a sense of shared experience. For believers, it also represents participation in a historical moment, being present when one chapter of church history closes and another prepares to open. The funeral itself, typically held between 4 and 6 days after death, represents the culmination of public mourning. Attended by world leaders, religious representatives, and thousands of faithful, papal funerals blend diplomatic protocol with ancient religious tradition. The placement of the Pope's body follows specific tradition. Lying on a cypress coffin, which is placed inside a lead coffin, which is then enclosed in an elm coffin, 3 layers symbolizing the Trinity and offering practical preservation. At Pope Francis's request, however, his funeral would diverge from recent precedent. The service would maintain essential elements of Catholic funeral liturgy while embodying the simplicity that characterized his papacy. Following the funeral mass comes the burial, traditionally in the crypts beneath St. Peter's Basilica, where popes throughout the centuries rest in simple marked tombs. Pope Francis, however, has expressed his wish to be buried in the Basilica of St. Mary Major, the first pope in over a century to be interred outside the Vatican. This choice reflects his deep personal devotion to the Virgin Mary, explains Father Roberto Salinas, a priest who has studied Francis's spirituality. The Basilica of St. Mary Major was the first church Francis visited after his election, and he regularly prayed there before and after his international journeys. By choosing it as his final resting place, he creates a lasting connection between his papacy and his personal faith journey. As the Pope's body is laid to rest, another dimension of Vatican ritual begins: preparation for selecting his successor. The papal apartments are unsealed and thoroughly renovated, symbolically cleansing the space for whoever will next occupy it. Meanwhile, the Church enters what might be its most mysterious period, the interregnum between popes. During this time, most Vatican operations slow significantly. The Roman Curia continues essential functions but avoids major decisions. The College of Cardinals assumes temporary governance, but with limited authority. This deliberate institutional pause creates space for reflection before the process of selecting a new leader begins. Throughout these elaborately structured ceremonies, we witness the intersection of individual spiritual journey and collective religious expression. The rituals surrounding a pope's death address our deepest questions about mortality, legacy, and continuity, questions that drive both personal spiritual seeking and institutional religious practice. In their precision and symbolism, these ceremonies transform the universal human experience of loss into an opportunity for meaning-making and community affirmation. The tension between tradition and innovation. In the shadowy corridors of the Vatican, a quiet battle has persisted for centuries. The tension between preserving ancient traditions and embracing necessary change. This struggle becomes particularly visible during moments of transition, and perhaps never more dramatically than in the rituals surrounding a pope's death and succession. Pope Francis's decisions regarding his final arrangements have brought this tension into sharp relief, revealing deeper currents within Catholicism and spiritual seeking more broadly. There are those within the Vatican who believe every detail of papal tradition must be preserved exactly as it has been, explains Cardinal Giuseppe Romano, speaking in hushed tones from his office overlooking St. Peter's Square. Others, including Pope Francis himself, believe that tradition must breathe and evolve to remain meaningful. The Cardinal pauses, choosing his words carefully. This is not merely bureaucratic disagreement but reflects fundamentally different understandings of how divine truth manifests in human institutions. This tension emerges most visibly in Pope Francis's request to be buried outside the Vatican at the Basilica of St. Mary Major, a departure from more than a century of papal tradition. While seemingly a simple matter of location, this decision carries profound symbolic weight. By choosing burial in a church beloved by ordinary Romans rather than the papal crypts beneath St. Peter's, Francis makes a statement about the nature of spiritual authority itself. Dr. Elena Martelli, who studies Vatican history at Sapienza University, notes, "Throughout his papacy, Francis has emphasized that true power lies in service, not in position." His burial choice completes this message, suggesting that even in death, a pope belongs not in an exclusive crypt, but among the faithful he served. The significance of this decision becomes clearer when contrasted with the elaborate traditions it modifies. For centuries, papal funerals and burials have followed precisely choreographed protocols that emphasize the office's unique status. The Pope's body laid in state on an elevated catafalque, surrounded by Swiss guards in ceremonial armor, creates a powerful visual representation of spiritual authority. The triple-nested coffin, cypress within lead within elm, symbolizes both the Trinity and the protection of the papal remains from time itself. Francis's requested modifications, a simple wooden coffin displayed at ground level rather than elevated, subtly but powerfully challenged these symbolic expressions of authority. By requesting simplicity even in death, observes Sister Lucia Vasquez, a theologian at Georgetown University, Francis continues his lifelong critique of what he has called the temptation of privilege within religious institutions. This tension between tradition and innovation reflects a paradox at the heart of many religious institutions. They must simultaneously preserve ancient truths and respond to contemporary realities. Too much rigidity can lead to irrelevance. Too much change risks losing essential identity. The conflict plays out in practical terms during transition periods. Some Vatican insiders, speaking anonymously, express concern that Francis's modifications could undermine the symbolic gravity of papal succession. These traditions developed over centuries for important reasons, says one senior official. They communicate something essential about the papacy's unique role. Simplifying them risks diminishing that understanding. Others counter that Francis's innovations actually strengthen tradition by returning to more ancient principles. The early popes were buried much more simply, notes church historian Father Thomas Rosica. What Francis proposes isn't radical innovation, but recovery of earlier Christian practice. He's reminding us that beneath the accumulated pageantry lies a simpler truth about Christian leadership. The psychological dimensions of this tension are complex. Traditions provide security and continuity, particularly during times of transition. The predictable rituals following a pope's death create a container for collective emotions and a firm institutional permanence beyond any individual. Yet traditions can also calcify, becoming divorced from their original meaning and purpose. What we're witnessing is a fundamental dialogue about authenticity and spiritual expression, suggests Rabbi David Goldstein, who has studied interfaith approaches to ritual. Every religious tradition faces this question. When does adherence to form enhance connection to the divine, and when does it become an obstacle? Francis seems to be suggesting that sometimes less is more, that simplicity can create space for more authentic spiritual encounter. This dialogue between tradition and innovation extends beyond Catholicism to spiritual seeking more broadly. Many contemporary spiritual seekers report feeling alienated by elaborate religious structures, yet hungry for authentic ritual. The growing popularity of both ancient contemplative practices and simplified modern expressions reflects this tension. John Winters, the former Wall Street analyst now studying theology, reflects, "What drew me to spiritual seeking wasn't ecclesiastical pomp, but the search for authentic meaning. Yet I've come to appreciate how tradition can guide that search." The question isn't tradition versus innovation, but how they can inform each other. Perhaps the most striking aspect of this tension is how it mirrors the internal dialogue of individual spiritual seeking. Just as institutions must balance preservation and adaptation, individuals navigating spiritual questions must discern which inherited beliefs to maintain and which to reconsider. This parallel between institutional and personal spiritual journeys suggests a deeper connection. Both are attempting to access transcendent truth through imperfect human means. Pope Francis's choices regarding his funeral and burial can thus be understood not as rejection of tradition, but as participation in tradition's ongoing conversation. By emphasizing simplicity and proximity to ordinary believers, he offers a particular interpretation of Catholic tradition that privileges service over status, accessibility over elevation. The brilliance of Francis's approach, concludes Cardinal Romano, is that he honors tradition's essence while questioning its accidental elements. He reminds us that all religious forms, even the most ancient and beautiful, exist to serve a deeper purpose, connecting humans to the divine and to each other. As the Vatican prepares for the eventual transition, this tension between tradition and innovation continues to shape both institutional protocols and individual spiritual journeys. The question is not whether tradition will prevail over innovation or vice versa, but how their creative dialogue will unfold, producing expressions of spirituality that honor ancient wisdom while speaking authentically to contemporary hearts.